Hello, everyone. Welcome to Theory. And today we're going to be covering Lesson 18. So before we begin, let's do our evaluation, see how you do. Okay, ready? Boys. The boys were being loud. Boys. Number 2, think. The brief think. I think he has been there before. Think. Number 3, keys. What did you do with your keys? Number 4, question. Do you have a question? Number 5, fights. The dog fights with other dogs. Number 6, budges. She budges when she wants to. Number 7, they. They went to the store. They. Number 8, roses. He got her roses. Number 9, needs. The dog needs lots of love. And number 10, written. The note was written on old paper. Written. All right, let's look this over and see how you did. You're going to follow along, and I want you to read from your steno notes, your actual steno. Okay, not the transcribed side, but your actual steno notes. All right, so let's look at number 1, boys. B-O-I, and in a second stroke, we're going to come back for final Z. Anytime we have a plural, we come back for final Z. Number 2, think. T-H, short I, think. Number 3, keys. K, long E, in a separate stroke, final Z. Number 4, question. K-W-E. Number 5, fights. F, long I, G-T, in a separate stroke, come back for final Z. Number 6, budges. B-U, final J, in a separate stroke, come back for final Z. Number 7, the brief they, T-H-E. Number 8, roses. R, long O-Z, in a separate stroke, come back for final Z. Number 9, needs. N, long E-D, in a separate stroke, come back for final Z. And number 10, written. The brief written. W-R, short I-N, written. All right, so again, if you struggled with any of that, go back and practice lesson 17. You don't want to move on to 18 until you've got that down, okay? That gives you a little snapshot of what you know, or how well you know it. All right, let's move on to lesson 18. Today, your main concepts are going to be final ED words, coming back for the final D for ED words, very similar to plural words. Plural words, we come back for final Z. Final ED words that are past tense, we're going to come back for the final D. You're also going to learn what's called stitching. Stitching is basically spelling out a word. So if somebody says, my name is Jill, J-I-L-L, you're going to learn today how to stitch. All right, so that's what we call stitching. All right, so we're going to first start off with 18.1, which is going to cover word endings with final D. This is, again, same rules apply as to the plural. Okay, so let's look at the first sentence. Tilted. So we're going to write it as T-I-L-T, and then we're going to come back for final D in a separate stroke. Some of these words it is possible to come back or to strike the D in the first stroke, but we're never going to do that. We're always going to come back for final D. And the same rules or reasoning applies to the plural words. It just makes it more accurate. We figure if you have to come back for a final D, you're only going to do that if you have to. If you throw it in there, then there's always a question of, oh, did I really mean to strike that D or not? And once you get into speeds, if you want to add that to the same stroke, if it's possible, you can do that. But for theory, you want to stick to this rule. Okay, keep everything consistent, clean and accurate. All right, so let's look at the second one, viewed. That's a great example of a word that could possibly have the D in the same stroke, but we're going to come back in a second stroke. So viewed is going to be written as V long U. Lift up in a second stroke, strike that final D. Okay. Faded, F long A D, second stroke. You're going to hit that final D again. Even though fade ends with the D, we still have to add the ED, which is coming back for final D. All right. Then we've got tossed. I'm going to use my pointer so I don't get in the way. Tossed, T-O-S, in a second stroke, come back for final D. Now, I've had some students in the past ask me, well, some of these words we've never had before, but you've had the concept, so you should be able to write any word that you've already learned the concept with, okay? So we're not throwing anything out there that you haven't already learned, all right? Rated, R long A-D, come back in a second stroke with final D. So if it's just raid, it's going to be written as R long A-D, rated, you're coming back for final D. Panted, P-A-N-T, in a second stroke, come back for final D. Slanted, S-L-A-N-T, second stroke, come back for final D. Past, P-A-S, in a second stroke, come back for final D. Laughed, laughed is written very phonetic, L-A-F, in a second stroke, come back for final D. Now, line 4, judged. Don't forget, we have a brief word, judge, which is initial J, but even though, again, we could possibly throw in that D in one stroke, we're not going to. We're going to come back for final D in a separate stroke. So that's what that forward slash is. It means come back for in a separate stroke. So judged is going to be written as initial J, use your brief. Second stroke, come back for final D. Loved, L-O, final V, in a second stroke, come back for D. Hoped, H long O-P, second stroke, come back for final D. Wished, W-I-S-H, second stroke, come back for final D. Tamed, T long A, final M, in a second stroke, come back for final D. Matched, M-A-C-H, in a second stroke, come back for final D. Reached, R-A-E-C-H, in a second stroke, come back for final D. Faced, F long A-S, in a second stroke, come back for final D. And we've got teased, notice that's written with the final Z, T-A-E-Z, in a separate stroke, come back for final D. Then we've got pitted, shaded, salted. Now notice salted is written with a broad A, S-A-U-L-T, come back for final D. Has a ah sound. It's spelled with an A, has a ah sound, so it's a broad A. Bolted, long O. Darted, patted, loaned, long O. Fished, sagged, stacked, hugged, paired. Paired is written P long A-R, in a separate stroke, come back for final D. Prayed, long A. Mapped, fainted, long A. Hunted, rented. Now let's look at towed. If you remember, the tow truck is the one that is flagged, so we're going to write that as T long O with the flag. Come back for final D in a separate stroke. The toe on your foot is not flagged. And the way I always remembered that was telling myself the toe on my foot is more important than the tow truck. So the tow truck is the one that gets flagged, whatever helps you to remember. Wilted, nodded. Now, nodded has an ah sound, but it's spelled with an O, so we keep it with an O. Hinted, sated, long A. Tanned, weaved, W-A-E, final V in a separate stroke. Come back for final D, weaved. Pinned, robbed, stuffed, played, long A. Washed, let's look at washed. Washed is spelled with an A, has an ah sound, so it's going to be a broad A, W-A-U-S-H in a separate stroke. Come back for final D. Shunned. Now, down below on your paper, I want you to write down 2 exceptions. Okay, I'm going to write this on our board. Okay. I'm writing on the whiteboard so you can see this. All right. Oops, clear. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. All right, so I want you to write this down. And I am just enlarging this. Okay, now we have 2 exceptions. The first one's going to be laid. I laid my purse down. That's going to be L long A D. And paid, P long A D. Laid and paid. Now, if you notice, I'm going to make a little bullet point here. Notice these words don't end with ED. So all these words above end in ED. So we come back for final D. But laid and paid do not end with ED. So just think of it as these 2 words have a D that is at the end of the word. So that's why we write it all in one stroke. Okay, so I'm going to write that down here. Notice these words don't end with ED like the others, and that will help. Okay. All right, so those are our 2 exceptions, and they're each written as one stroke. So laid, L long AD, paid, P long AD. Okay, so make sure you write that down. All right, so we're going to close this out. Go back to our regular board here. All right, so 18.2, it's a sentence drill, and it's going to focus on sentences that have the final ED, so we come back for the final D. All right, now the first sentence says, they waved to us. Now notice that wave is flagged. To wave a flag, you get a flag. So that's going to be W long A with the final V. And you're going to flag it, lift up, and then come back for final D for the ED. They waved to us, period. Okay. Second sentence over, Joe passed by the store. Now, don't forget, we need to flag Joe because it's a proper noun that's 1 syllable. So if it's 1 syllable, we always have to flag it. Joe passed by the store. Now, we cannot phrase by the because it would conflict with bit, like the dog bit you. Okay, so don't make yourself a little note. Do not phrase by the. That's why it's not underlined. Okay, she patted the kitten, period. Line 2, he traced the stolen loot, period. Stolen is going to be written as ST, long OL. Second stroke, come back for EN. Loot, L A-O-T. It's spelled O-O, so we use the A-O. Okay. Visit the haunted house. Visit. V-I-Z, second stroke, I-T. The haunted house. Haunted is a broad A. H-A-U-N-T, second stroke, come back for final D. Okay. We missed the train, period. We planted roses this summer, period. He kissed her on the head, period. Don't forget your phrase on the O-T. We all prayed for rain, period. All is going to be A-U-L. Okay. Line 4, his car was towed to the shop. Again, we're going to flag towed. It's the tow truck, so we're going to flag it. He teed up his ball, period. Ball is simply B-A-L. Okay, so it doesn't conflict with ball. The baby will bawl his head off. They showed the new slides, period. Now, in that one, you've got an actual word that is plural. So don't forget, you come back for final Z for slides. If it helps, write the word in steno above the actual word, and then when you go to do your homework, it just gives you a peace of mind knowing that you're writing it correctly. Just a little thought. Okay. Line 5, they played ball in the winter, period. The boys vied for the prize, period. Vied is going to be V, long I, and a second stroke, come back for D. We viewed the rainbow, period. Robert teased his sister, period. Now you don't have to flag Robert because it's 2 syllables. Okay. He patted the account, period. He tried to win the game, period. Now, for some reason in the past, some students have struggled with the word tried, but if you notice, it ends with ED. So you're going to write it as T-R, long I, in a separate stroke, come back for final D. Okay, so you can say try and tried. So we come back for final D in a separate stroke. Line 7, her mom nodded at her to go, period. I should have traded the car, period. My son used the car, period. Line 8, the company raised the rate, period. The bones were fused, period. Let's look at fused. F, long U, Z. Come back in a separate stroke for final D. They raided the gin mill, period. Gin, it's spelled with a G, but has the J sound, so we're going to write it as J-I-N. Make sure you use your S-K-W-R for J. Okay. Line 9, she laughed at the bad joke, period. The company is well staffed, period. They stuffed it in the closet, period. Let's look at closet. K-L-O-Z. Come back for a second stroke, E-T. Closet. Line 10, she saved to buy the new home, period. And that buy is a long I. New is going to be a short U. He dived in and saved her life, period. He huffed and puffed, period. Line 11, Bob raved about the new play, period. Bob is going to be flagged. It's one syllable. The stuff was piled up high, period. High, H, long I. It held hard for a time, period. Line 12, he failed to stop for the light, period. Light is going to be written as L, long I, G-T. It's a G-H word, G-H-T word, so we use the final G-T. The boys rowed to the shore, period. She vowed not to go, period. Vowed, V-O-U, in a separate stroke, come back for final D. Vowed. Line 13, the ice cream melted in the sun, period. The bed sagged in the center, period. Now let's go over center. Center can be written 2 different ways. You can either write it as S-E-N in a separate stroke, come back for T-E-R, or you can write it as S-E-N-T, come back for E-R. It's totally up to you. Okay, it's wherever you hear the break, either center or center. Okay, and really the break is after the N, center, but you can always opt to throw in the T because it's possible, and that way all you have to do is come back for ER. That's totally up to you. We stayed many days, period. Don't forget your brief many, final PL. They tugged at the coil of rope, period. Ray mocked her bad manners, period. You want to flag Ray, one syllable proper noun. John hugged his mom, period. Make sure you flag John. Line 15, the bird would not be tamed, period. Now, we cannot phrase would not because it will conflict with the word won, W-O-N. So that's why we can't phrase it. He seemed to miss her, period. He hooked a big fish, period. Line 16, the faucet leaked too much, period. Too much, T-A-O, final C-H. If you can replace so or also, then you know it's the T-O-O, meaning so or also. Okay, the faucet leaked so much. That's how you know it's T-O-O. All right, they looked at each brook, period. He was judged to be right, period. They paged him at the hotel, period. Now, hotel can also be written either H, long O, T, come back for E-L, or H, long O, come back for T-E-L. Either one works. The company staged a play, period. And staged is going to be written as S-T, long A, final J because of the sound. Come back for final D. See that the gate is latched, period. That gate is flagged. Ends with an E, so it's flagged. Line 18, he watched for the new moon, period. Watch, that's a broad A, W-A-U-C-H. Come back for final D, for the new moon. The skirt matched her outfit, period. He feared for his life, period. 18.2, over on the next page, the sentence drill continues. Line 19, he lured the fish with bait, period. Let's look at lured. That's going to be written as L, long U-R. Come back for a second stroke, final D. Lured the fish with bait, period. The outfit was washed with soap. Again, wash is a broad A. Was, just a reminder, W-A-Z, not with an S. It's not was. The fire seared the meat, period. Line 20, do you want mashed potatoes in Iraq? Want. Now you have a choice. You can either write it the way that it's spelled, W-A-N-T, or you can write it as a broad A, W-A-U-N-T. I personally like to write it with a broad A because I hear the ah, and I don't like to have to think about it, so I hear the broad A, so I write it as W-A-U-N-T, but it's up to you. Let's look at potatoes. There are a couple ways to write that one. Most people say potato. They don't say potato, but some people I've heard, especially from Idaho, some say they say it as potato. So if you do that, you can write it with a long O. But if you say potato, you're going to write it with a short O, depending on how it's spoken. Okay, so let's look at our first two ways that we can write it. We can either write it as P-O, tate, T, long A-T, and then come back for long O. And then, of course, final Z would be a separate stroke. Or you can write it as P-O-T, put, and then come back for long A-T, and then come back for long O, and then, of course, final Z. And that's another way. Now, if you write it with, or if you say it with the long O, potato, you can do the same thing except throw in the first stroke, make that a long O, potato. Okay. All right. He pushed the truck off the road, period. He mapped out the plan, period. Line 21, Jim hoped for more tools to use, period. Jim is going to be flagged. It's proper name that's one syllable. Hoped for more tools. Tool, T-A-O-L. Come back for final Z. Use, long U-Z. It's not use. Okay, the dog lapped up the water, period. She rubbed her arm with oil, period. Oil, O-I-L. Has your store been robbed in Iraq? The princess sobbed and sobbed, period. He was pinned to the mat, period. The starfish sunned on the rock, period. Rock is simply R-O-K, rock. The high wind fanned the fire, period. They booked the flight, period. Flight, F-L long I-G-T. All right. Moving on over to 18.3. We've got numbers on the number bar. So today we're going to tackle numbers on the number bar. So we've already gone over numbers 1 through 10 that we want spelled out. But numbers that are over 10 will be written on our number bar. Okay, so numbers are dictated often. So it's very important that you get these down. You need to be very accurate with your number bar, because chances are if you make a mistake, you're not going to know you made a mistake. If somebody says, I am 15 years old, and you accidentally hit the 0 instead of the 5, you know, it might be hard to know that you even made a mistake. So you're going to hear numbers with ages, social security numbers, dates, birth dates, addresses, phone numbers, number amounts. We're going to learn about dollars in another lesson, but with number amounts, you are going to use the number bar. So it's very important that you master your numbers in this lesson and continue to practice them. You want to get to where if you strike the 9, well, let's say you strike the 9, but you really wanted the 8, you want to know, okay, I just made a mistake. You simply hit your asterisk and then strike the number that you meant to hit. So the asterisk is still used if you make a mistake with the number on a number bar. Okay, so at the top, if you notice that it says 1-stroke numbers, all those numbers are going to be, they're going to be stricken in 1 stroke. Okay, whenever it's possible, and this is the rule, whenever possible, you want to strike your numbers at the same time. But sometimes it's not possible. For instance, if I have the word 91, obviously I can't strike 19 because it's going to be 19. But if it's 91, then I have to strike the 9, lift up, and then strike the 1. So on your screen, or even if you have an older machine that has paper, you're going to notice that the 9 would be above it. Right below it would be the 1. So when you go to read, you would read it as 91. Okay, so that's why this top section focuses on 1-stroke numbers. And basically, it's pretty easy. If you look at this, it's going to be 1-stroke numbers has to be the first number is lesser than the second number. Okay, so if I've got the number 17, I know that I can strike 1 7 together because the 1 is a smaller number than 7. Okay, but if I have 71, I know the 7 is larger than the 1, so I know it's going to be a 2-stroke number. So that's what we're going to do down at the bottom where it says 2-stroke numbers. Okay, now it's going to be very complicated if you don't separate each of these numbers with a comma. So I want you to separate with a comma. Okay, write that down if you need to so you don't forget. That way when you go back to look and you're comparing your notes with your homework and you're grading it, you're going to look to see if you made a mistake. And that's okay if you did, but I want you to cross it out, highlight it, and rewrite it. Or if you go to strike it on your machine and you realize, oh, I struck the wrong number, hit your asterisk key. Okay, so let's look at 57. Well, before we even start with the lesson, let's just go back over our numbers. There is a designated key for every finger that we have, and we do not substitute any fingers for any other keys. So just tell yourself, my fingers are each assigned to 1 key, okay? So the number 1 is I'm going to use my pinky on my left hand. Number 2, my ring finger on my left hand. Number 3, my middle finger on my left hand. Number 4, my index finger on my left hand. Number 5 is going to be 2 fingers. That's the exception, 5 and 0. I'm going to use my middle finger because it's my longest finger of my left hand along with my left thumb. I'm going to strike the 5 with both of these fingers. It's a little hard for me to do because this keyboard chart is spread out. Okay, the same with the 0. I'm going to use my middle finger and my left thumb. Okay, both using my left hand. Okay, now 6. All of a sudden 6 is on this side of the asterisk key. We don't have any number here where the asterisk key is. It's just a space. Okay, so if my hands are in home position, I'm going to strike the 6 using my right hand, index finger. 7, my middle finger on my right hand. 8, my ring finger on my right hand. 9, my pinky on my right hand. Okay, and if I want to strike 10, that's going to be struck with the 1 and the 0. Okay, so here's the great part of these 2 letters here. If you are striking a number that it goes along with one of these, then you no longer have to use your middle finger up here if it's going to be a double-digit number. If I want to strike 10, right, all I have to do is put my pinky up here on the 1 and use my thumb on the 0, and I'm going to strike those at the same time, and I'm going to get a 1 and a 0. Okay, again, it's kind of hard for me because this is so big, but you can do it. Okay, same with 15. If I need 15, I'm going to strike the 1 and the 5 together, and because my finger, my pinky up here is depressed on the number bar, then all I have to do is strike this, and it's going to go down, and you're going to get a 1 and 5. Same with 25. I would strike the 2 and the 5 together. 20, the 2 and the 0 here. Okay, 35. I would do this, 35 together. Okay, 30, 3, 0 together. 45, 4, 5. Okay, 40, 4, 0. All right, now anything after that, if I wanted 65, I would have to strike 6, lift up, then I would strike my 5, because the 5 and the 0 is going to come, it's going to be printed on this side of the asterisk. So any of these, if I need the 5 or the 0 to come after one of the, like 65, 60, it's going to be 2 strokes. 75, 70, 85, 80, 95, 90, and so forth. Okay, now we are going to get into higher numbers eventually, but today we're going to just focus on 1 stroke and 2 stroke numbers. So just double-digit numbers. Okay, we don't want to overwhelm you, but eventually we're going to get to dates and all types of numbers, birth dates, phone numbers, addresses, and so on. Okay, I might even throw in a couple addresses in the readback, in our next readback with this lesson, but it won't be anything huge. Okay. But after this, then we're going to start implementing more and more numbers so that you get more and more used to it and comfortable with it. Okay, so again, I want you to start with line 1, and you're going to write 57, then strike your comma. Okay, so let's take a look at that. 57, I would strike this at the same time that I strike the 7. The 5 is here, the 7's here. It can be done in 1 stroke. 57, then lift up, strike your comma. And it's nice because this is laid out for you to show you which numbers are going to be 1 stroke, and then down below it says 2 strokes, so you know it's going to be 2 strokes, okay? Then we've got 49. So if I want to write 49, I'm going to use this finger, the index, and my pinky, 49. Again, our pinkies are kind of weak, so really pay attention and press that down so they both show up, 4, 9. If you're just getting a 4, that means you're not striking that 9 hard enough. Okay, then strike your comma. 68. If my hands are in home position, I'm going to strike the 6 and the 8, lift up, strike my comma. And if I'm only using the numbers on, let's say, the final side, I'm still going to have my hand on the home keys or home position over here because I need to be ready to go. If that speaker is speaking quickly, I need to be ready to go. So you don't want to drop your hand if you're doing 68. No, you want to have it up here in the home keys. Okay. All right, so you're going to work your way through all those numbers. Now looking down at the 2 stroke numbers. And I have had people ask me before, what happens if it's a repeated number? You will see some of those down below, like 77. So if your hands are in home position, it would just be 7, lift up, 7, lift up. So you're going to see 7, 7. Okay, if I have 55, I would strike the 5, lift up, strike the 5 again, and lift up. Okay. One question that I do want to address to you, because I know I've had it in the past with students, back up at the top where it says one stroke numbers in line 1, it says 57, 49, 68, 39, 29, 50. 50 is struck together. 50. I'm going to keep my finger up here, my middle finger, and I'm going to use my left thumb, and I'm going to put it right between the two, and I'm going to press down on right in the middle there, and I'm going to get a 50. That takes a little bit of practice. So if you need to, highlight your 50 so that you put a little bit of extra practice in with that. Okay, so 2-stroke numbers, obviously if it's a repeated number, 88, you're going to have to strike the 8, strike the 8 again. Okay. 91. So if my hands are in home position, I'm going to strike the 9, lift up, strike the 1, lift up, then strike my comma, lift up. 85. 8, lift up, strike my 5, lift up, strike my comma, lift up. 66. 6, 6, comma. 97. 9, 7, comma. Okay, so just tell yourself, every finger is assigned to a number. And I'm never going to borrow my pinky here for the 8 and vice versa. I'm not going to borrow my ring finger for the 9. No, each one is assigned to a number, and we don't borrow ever. That's a big no-no. Okay, you don't want to create bad habits. I can't tell you how many students have called me in the past and they say, oh, I'm in speeds now and I got used to borrowing. My pinky was weak, so I would just use my ring finger, and now I'm not accurate with my 8 and 9. And you do not want to get into that habit. It's very hard to break, okay? All right, so that's what 18.3 is about. Moving on over to 18.4, we've got practice sentences using our new numbers. So again, if the first number is smaller than the second number, you know you can do it in one stroke. Now, here's the rule. Eventually, when you get more numbers, like let's say I were to dictate a sentence that says, I live at 1, 2, 3, 4 Oak Street. You only want to pair 2 numbers at the same time, no more than 2, and you pair what you can. So if I say I live at 1, 2, 3, 4 Oak Street, I'm going to strike 1, 2 together, lift up, strike my 3, 4, lift up, Oak Street. Okay. Now, if I were to say I live at 1, 2, 3 Oak Street, you have the choice. You can either pair up 1, 2, lift up, or you can pair 2, 3. So you hit 1, lift up, and then hit the 2, 3. When you get into speeds, it's going to be more as to how you hear it. Okay, so if you hear 1, 2, 3, then you're probably going to pair up 1, 2. If you hear 1, 2, 3, you're probably going to pair up the 2, 3. There's no right or wrong in that, but you do want to pair up 2 numbers at the same time when possible, but not any more than 2, because even though you can do 1, 2, 3 all at the same time, the chances of you making a mistake are pretty high. So that's why we only want you to do 2 at a time, but that is the rule. 2 at a time when possible, but not more than 2. Okay? So let's look at some of your practice sentences. 18.4, we have sentence 1, trade for 38 lots, period. We can strike 38 together. Okay? He sells to 45 stores, period. We can strike the 4, 5 together. Okay. He painted 41 houses, period. So we're going to have to strike the 4, lift up, and then strike the 1, lift up. 41 houses, period. Line 2, Joan is 26 today. Joan is going to be flagged because it's one syllable, J, long O-N, with the flag, Joan. He ate 68 salted peanuts, period. Salt is a broad A. Jane will be 31 on Friday, period. Jane is flagged. Line 3, he caught 74 passes, period. Caught, K-A-U-G-T. It is 96 miles to Denver, period. We don't have to flag Denver because it's 2 syllables. Denver. You have to be 18 to go, period. And notice everything is underlined that's supposed to be phrased. Line 4, we won 87 to 69, period. It was 12 feet on the corner, period. Now, corner can be written 2 different ways. Either K long O-R-N, come back for E-R, or K long O-R, come back for N-E-R. You have a choice there. We got 13 donuts, period. Let's look at donuts. D long O, come back for N-U-T, and then in the third stroke, come back for final Z. Line 5, the tower is 97 feet high, period. Tower, T-O-U-R. Tour would be T long U-R. What's the difference between tower and tour? It is 50 feet in the air, period. And you can strike your 5-0 at the same time. We want you to. Okay. Use 20 tons of rock, period. Use, long U-Z. It's not use 20 tons of rock. But if I were to have a sentence that were to say, the bathroom is in use, then yes, you would use your final S. But in this case, it's a final Z. Use. Line 6, the score was 17 to 14. Was, W-A-Z, was. They won the game by 52 points. Points, P-O-I-N-T. Come back for final Z. He will sell 93 sets to us, period. Line 7 looks great. Line 8, looking at the second sentence over, he will sell 27 pies at the fair. Fair, F, long A-R. It is 72 miles to town. Town, T-O-U-N. He has 15 dolls, period. H-A-Z for has. It's not has. The score was 25 to 30, period. He is 35 years old, period. And again, if you forget to come back for final Z on plural words, make a little forward slash in between the letter and the S, if that helps you, or write it in steno above it. Okay. All right, looking over at 18.5, we've got consonant compounds. Today, we're focusing on initial TH and final LD. All right, so initial TH, final LD, words. Let's look at the first one. Those, that has a final Z sound, so we're going to write it as TH, long O, final Z, those. These, TH, long E, final Z. Thought, that has an aw sound, even though it's spelled O-U, that's one of those exceptions and rules. If the word has a GHT ending, it has an aw sound, we're going to write it with a broad A, T-H-A-U-G-T. Then, T-H-E-N. Thin, T-H-I-N. Than, T-H-A-N. Thick, T-H short I, final K. Them, T-H-E-M. Though, T-H long O. Very phonetic. Thud, T-H-U-D. Thug, T-H-U-G. Thief, T-H long E-F. Theme, T-H long E final M. Thus, T-H-U-S. Thunder, T-H-U-N. Second stroke, come back for D-E-R. Or you can write it as T-H-U-N-D, thund, come back for E-R. Either one works, either thunder or thund-er. Thoughtful, that's a GHT word, so it has a broad A sound, so we're going to write it as T-H-A-U-G-T. Second stroke, come back for final FL. Okay, that's one of those words. If it has a full ending, like a suffix with full, we write it as final FL. Okay, same with thoughtless. THAUGT. Come back for final LS for the suffix less. We don't want to write it as LES because then our software thinks it's the word less. Thaw. THAU. The. TH long E. Thus. THUS. Thong. THONG. Thorn. TH long ORN. Thumb. THUM. It's got a silent B, so we're going to write it phonetically. Thumb. Thigh. TH long I. Throw. THR long O. Throw. Third. THIRD. Theft. THEFT. Thing. THING. Thyroid. TH long I. Thigh. Come back for ROID. And really, you only would want to write it that way. You wouldn't want to. They don't really say. You don't hear the break in. You don't say thyroid. No, it's thyroid. So right there, that's a great example of not really having a choice because you hear the break after thigh. Thigh, and then roid, R-O-I-D. It's not thyroid. Okay, that. We have a brief for that, but still you're getting practice with your TH. THA for that. That's our brief. All right, line 7. Excuse me. Words that end with final LD. Gold. Initial G, long O, LD. Gold. Meld. MELD. Sold. Long O. S long O, LD. Bald. That's a broad A. BAULD. Weld. WELD. Bold. Long O. B long O, LD. Fold. F long O, LD. Told. T long O, LD. Old. Long O, LD. Cold. K long O, LD. Scald. SKAULD. Hold. H long O, LD. Mold. M long O, LD. Mold. Make sure you write that with a long O. Wild. W long I, LD. Held. HELD. Guild. Initial G, short I, LD. Mild. M long I, LD. Field. F long E, LD. Veld. Initial V, E, LD. Silled. S short I, LD. Ald. AULD. World. Now, world is not really a long O. We don't say world. It's kind of even hard to say it with a long O. It's just world. So we're going to write it like it's spelled. WORLD. World. Wheeled. W long E, LD. Child. Now, this is a CH word, okay? So it's very important to know. Obviously, we don't have a C, a CH that we can use. Our C is the KR, by the way, but because we can't do CH because the H is above the R, what we do is we borrow the KH for the CH words. Okay, that's a rule. So any CH words like child is going to be written with a KH. Kind of like we write cat with the K instead of a C. Okay, so we're going to write it as KH long I, LD. That's how we write child. Yield. Y long E, LD. Scold, S-K long O-L-D. Shield, S-H long E-L-D. Unfold, U-N, second stroke, F long O-L-D. Foretold. Now, we talked about the prefix for a while back. We write for as F-O-R. I will go for you. But words that have the prefix for, as in foretold, forgot, forgotten, we use our long O. F long O-R. Told, T long O-L-D. And that tells our software we're talking about a word, a word that has the prefix for. So use your long O. Outfield, O-U-T, second stroke, F long E-L-D. All right. 18.6, we've got sentences that practice those consonant compounds. If you look over at the second sentence on line 1, it says, file these papers. Don't forget, paper is a brief, P long A-P. So then we would come back for final Z in a separate stroke because it's plural. Looking over at the third sentence in line 1, Joe has more than I do, period. Joe is going to be flagged because it's one syllable. Okay, and I'm going to show you how we can phrase more than. Okay, let's see here. Share screen. Let's see. Oh, we want the whiteboard. Okay. Now, oops, no, I don't want that. Okay. All right, we have a brief or a phrase for more than. More than is going to be written as M long O-R-N. Now, if you have the word mourn, like they will mourn the loss of their dog, that's going to be written as M-O-U-R-N. And then if we have mourn, like wake me up in the morn, short for morning, that would be written just as M-O-R-N, just like it's spelled, okay? So make sure you write those down, and right above that, more than, write the phrase M long O-R-N. That comes up often. You're going to love that phrase, more than. Okay, so let's save it here. All right, back to our class. Joe has more than I do, period. All right, then we've got line 2. I will, although I hate to. Let's look at although. All is going to be written as A-U-L, though, T-H long O. Line 3, second sentence. Liz is very thin now, period. Liz needs to be flagged. It's one syllable. Line 4, looking over at the second sentence. The stew is too thick, period. That too you can replace with so. The stew is so thick. That's how we know it's T-O-O. I can't tell you how many times I read things online or in a paper, in a magazine, and they've got to as T-O when it means so or also. And it makes me cringe. So if you've got the T-O-O, you're writing it as T-A-O. Okay. All right. Line 5. Thus, I will try to write, period. Don't forget your brief for write, W-R short I. She was very thoughtful, period. Thoughtful, T-H-A-U-G-T. Second stroke, come back for final F-L. That was very thoughtless. Again, T-H-A-U-G-T, come back for final L-S. Line 6, second sentence, thaw out the meat. Thaw, T-H-A-U, thaw. Line 7, second sentence, do not step on the thorn. Thorn is a long O. Next sentence over, my thumb is broke. That's a long O. Line 8, he has thick hair. Has, H-A-Z. Next sentence over, the thong is on my foot. Thong, T-H-O-N-G. It has an aw sound, but it's spelled with an O, so we keep it with an O. On, the brief for on is just O. Line 9, sell the gold locket. Gold is a long O. We sold the paint. Sold is a long O. The engine is very old. Old is a long O. Line 10, fold the letter. Fold is a long O. I told him to sell, period. Told is a long O. Will you weld the pipes for me, interrog? Me is a pronoun, so it's written just as M-E, not a long E. Line 11, the second sentence over, the steam will scald you. That's a broad A word, S-K-A-U-L-D. The old man is bald. Bald is a broad A word, B-A-U-L-D. Line 12, hold the stock for us. Hold is a long O. Stock is written just like it's spelled, S-T-O-K. Okay, the mold is too big. Mold, long O. And we can say so big, so we know it's T-A-O. Well, T-O-O, but spelled A-O on our machine. Okay. Line 13, third sentence over, he held a towel to his head. Towel, T-O-U-L. Line 14, that was a bold move. Bold is a long O. Move, M-O, final V. Yield to the traffic. Yield is a long E. Hit the ball to the outfield. Ball, B-A-L. Line 15, shield her from the sun. Shield, S-H, long E-L-D. Line 16, we will sail around the world. Sail. That sail is S, long A-L. The garage sale is the one that is flagged. Now I'm going to give you another brief. It's around. The brief for around is A-R-N-D, and that is like a squeeze. All right, think of it as a squeeze. I will add it to our whiteboard. Okay, around. A-R-N-D. All right. Then we've got the weather is mild. Weather, W-A-E-G-T. Come back for E-R. And last sentence, it will scald you. That's a broad A word. S-K-A-U-L-D. Scald. All right. Moving on over to 18.7. This is where we're going to cover our stitching. All right. Stitching. So again, we use stitching anytime anyone spells out a word. It could be a name, a place, anything. All right. So what we have to do is we have to let our software know we are stitching, meaning we're writing exactly what somebody says verbatim, and they are spelling it out. So if I were to say, I used to live on Oak Avenue, O-A-K. When I spell O-A-K out, that is what we call stitching. Okay, so before we even get into names and stitching, we're going to practice it using our alphabet. And this is a great way to learn how to stitch and how to get fast. So if you notice on 18.7, you have the alphabet A through Z, okay? The way we stitch is by striking our asterisk key and the letter at the same time, okay? So let's look at this. And there are some letters that we really haven't covered yet. So what I want you to do is I want you to highlight the C, okay? We really haven't covered the C yet. I want you to highlight the Q. Okay, I want you to highlight the X and the Z. All right, because those are, go ahead and highlight the I as well, because I do get a lot of questions about that. All right, so the way that we write stitching is by striking the asterisks. So before you even start the other homework, I want you to go through the whole alphabet and strike this asterisk key, okay? So if you notice, The C is the KR. That's how we write our C, using our ring and index finger of our left hand, KR. Okay, the I is a long I. We use the long I when we stitch. Okay, the Q is the KW, which when I was in theory, the way I remember that is I looked at the KW and I kind of used it as a sound, Q. KW kind of looks like Q, you know, the way it sounds. Okay, so KW is our Q. X is the KP. So think of this. This is how I remembered it. And X is actually two lines that crisscross each other. So the X is one of those that's crisscrossing the other one. The X is the KP. All right, so you're going to use your ring and middle finger of your left hand to do the X. Okay. Then we've got our Z, which is the STK, is Z, STK, using our pinky and ring finger. Now, let me just tell you, when you stitch, you're using all of the letters on the initial side. And then we've got our vowels, of course, which are down here, which they're not really considered initial or final. We never stitch using any letters on our final side, ever. That's a big no-no, okay? So you never stitch using any final letters on the final side. So the vowels are down here, and then the rest, all of the consonants are going to be on the initial side, okay? So let's go through here. I want you to do this with me. Here we go. A, I'm going to strike the letter and the asterisk. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Okay, so I might have gone a little fast for you, and that's okay. Go back and do that alphabet over and over and over again. Highlight the ones that you have a hard time with. Okay, some of the ones that you don't hear very often, like Q, X, Z, those can be a little tricky. But go through and that used to be my warm-up before I would even get on my machine once I got into speeds. I would go through the alphabet and hit my asterisks, A, B, C, D, E, and you just get to a point where you fly through it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. And you just get to where you are moving at a quick pace. And it's a great warm-up too. Do that before you start every theory lesson, okay? So that is what this stitching is all about. So when you do your homework, I want you to strike A and then go right into B. You don't have to strike your asterisks with this one, with this 18.7, because I want you to be able to see the alphabet, okay? You're just going to strike A asterisk, B asterisk, C asterisk together. A and the asterisk is together. B asterisk is together. It's always at the same time, okay? All right, once you've done the alphabet, move over to 18.8, which are practice. You're going to see practice names, I should say. Okay, so these are going to be names. Now, I get a lot of questions about proper names because sometimes there's more than one way to write a name. The most important thing to remember is that you have a readable outline. There are a lot of names that may be spelled two different ways, especially nowadays. It's very common. Like John could be spelled J-O-N or J-O-H-N. The most important thing is if you're on your machine, you write John, you want to write it as phonetically as possible, J-O-N with the flag. Okay, if the software doesn't recognize it, it's okay. If it's a test, like a theory test or a speed test once you get into speeds, you would go in to the edit mode after the test is done on your machine, and you would go up to that, SKWRO flag PB if the software doesn't recognize it, because the software doesn't recognize a lot of the proper names. And you would change that to the actual name, the correct spelling, okay? Another example is Kathy and Kathy. Some Kathys spell their name with a C, some do it with a K. The most important part is that you write it down phonetically and have a readable outline, okay? So 18.8 is what that is about. It's giving you names and spellings. So when you go to do these names, if you see a comma, you might want to highlight these commas. There's always going to be a comma before you start stitching. If there's stitching in a sentence and the stitching is in the middle of a sentence and the stitching is right in the middle and you've got a sentence leading up to it, and then after the stitching, the sentence continues, you're going to have a comma on both sides. So if you see a comma, you want to strike your comma on your machine. So let's look at the first one. First one says Marge Jones, comma, Jones. So the way you're going to write this on your machine is Marge, M-A-R-J. Now that's one syllable. I need to flag it. So I'm going to have to lift up here, hit my asterisk, then lift up. Okay? Jones. I don't really hear a Z. I hear an S. Jones. But you may hear a Jones. So in that case, you could write it with a Z or an S, whatever you hear. Jones. So I'm going to write Jones as J-long-O-N-S. Jones. And I'm going to flag it because it's one syllable. Now, proper names are not like, they're not treated like a word that is possessive. If a proper name ends with an S, like Jones or James, we still put the S or the Z on the same stroke if possible, because we don't consider that a plural word. Okay, so Jones would be J-long-O-N-S with the flag. Okay, don't come back for that S or Z. Okay, so we see Marge Jones, and then we see our comma. So we're going to strike our comma. Here comes the stitching. Okay, if you see the little hyphens in between each letter, that means we're saying it out loud and we're spelling it. J-O-N-E-S. Okay, so then we're going to stitch it. J-O-N-E-S. Okay, now with this one, it's probably better that you strike your period after each name, because if you use a comma, it might throw you off. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the okay to use your period after each stitching that you do with these proper names, okay? Period. All right. Now let's look at the second line. Ron Miller, comma, M-I-L-L-E-R. Okay, then period. So let's do this. Ron, we got to flag it because it's one syllable. Miller, M-I-L, Mill, come back for E-R, comma, then we're gonna spell it out, M-I-L-L-E-R, then strike your comma. Now, and I'm going to remind you guys when we have a test, I don't want you to have a period after the stitching, okay? If it's in the section of the test where it's strictly names and spellings, I'm going to tell you to take that period out at the end. The period is basically there to let you know, okay, I'm done stitching, I'm moving on to the next word. So then when you go to edit the test, you would take the period out unless it's a complete sentence. So it's kind of like what you do with the briefs and phrases section of a test. You write it, comma, the comma, and then you go back in the edit mode and take out the commas. It's the same type of concept, okay? All right. So what's really important here is that you write these words phonetically, okay? And they may not come up. Your software may not have these proper names in them, and that's okay, okay? You don't have to edit them unless it were a test, but for practice, as long as you have a readable outline, that's what you need to do. So let's look at number 3. Diane Fetzer. Diane. D long I, die, and I would come back for A-N, Diane. Fetzer. So we can write that as F-E-T, come back for S-E-R. I hear an S, Fetzer. Or you might hear a Fetzer. If you hear Fetzer, I would write that as F-E-T, come back for Z-E-R. This is our Z, S-T-K. It depends on what you hear. And then you would obviously stitch it out. Okay, F-E-T-Z-E-R, period. Okay, Fred Alvarez. Again, Fred has to be flagged, F-R-E-D with the flag. Alvarez, Al-ver-ez, comma, and then you're going to stitch it. A-L-V-E-R-E-Z, period. Okay, Martin Block. All right, now Martin, you can either write that as M-A-R-T, come back for I-N, or M-A-R, come back for T-I-N. It's up to you. It's wherever you hear that break. Okay, so just remember, it's important that you remember to write a readable outline. Okay, you're writing these proper names phonetically. Let's go over number 13, Adam Ortega. So Adam, I do A-D, I'd come back for A-M. Ortega, I would do Or-teg, T-E-G, then I would come back for A. But you also could do Or-te-ga, G-A. You know, that's up to you. All right, so you do have some flexibility with proper names, as long as you write it the way it sounds. Okay, let's look at the last one here. Marla Mears. Now, Marla can either be written as M-A-R, come back for L-A, or you can even do M-A-R-L, Marl, but I don't think the break is after the L. Marl, you don't say Marl, you say Marla. So I would write it the first way. Okay, Mears, M-A-E-R-S. One stroke because the S is part of her name. It's not considered a plural. Okay. All right. Looking on over at 18.9, practice sentences using our stitching. Number 1, J-O-E spells Joe, period. So we have to stitch J-O-E because we see the hyphens, right? So we're going to write it as J-O-E and then write spells Joe. And Joe is going to be J long O with the flag, period. His name is Robert, comma, R-O-B-E-R-T. Notice that there is a comma before it's stitched. That's a great example. If you were writing a test, editing a test, you would want a comma before the stitching. His name is Robert, comma, R-O-B-E-R-T, period. Now, with that being said, there are going to be times when you're going to see, when you stitch R-O-B-E-R-T, you might see a hyphen at the end of Robert after the T. If this is a test and you're editing this, you want to take out the hyphen at the end. Notice at the end of the sentences, we don't have any hyphens. You have to take it out, okay? The software is not smart enough to know, okay, this is the end of the sentence, so I'm going to take it out for you. You have to take it out yourself, okay? All right, line 3. Do you spell her name C-A-T-H-Y or K-A-T-H-Y in a ROG? Okay. Douglas spells his name D-O-U-G-L-A-S, period. Her name is Tara, comma, T-A-R-A, period. Give the receipt to Edna, comma, E-D-N-A, period. Line 7, Z-E-L-M-A is the way she spells her name, period. And that flows, so you don't need a comma after the A. Zelma is the way she spells her name. Kind of like line 3, do you spell her name C-A-T-H-Y? It's not asking a question. Like line 4, Douglas spells his name, it's a statement. Where line 5, it's like they're reiterating. Her name is Tara, T-A-R-A. Okay, so you would need a comma there. So maybe highlight all the commas so they stand out when you're doing your homework, okay? All right. Let's see here. Again, line 10, does he spell his name S-E-A-N or S-H-A-W-N? If I were writing the word Sean, I might write Sean as S-H-A-U-N with the flag. You might, if you have a son named Sean, you might write it as S-A-E-N with the flag. Okay? So, and it may come up as one and not the other, and that's okay. What you would do is you would go, if that were a test, you would go in the edit mode. When you're done with your test and you're editing, you would change it to the correct spelling. And every test, whether it be a theory test or a speed test, you're going to have a word list. And I'm going to give you all the proper nouns, and you're going to write those down. You're going to change it. And it's really important that you get the right spelling, because Kathy could be with a C or a K. So you don't want to get that wrong. If you did misspell it, it would be -1 because you didn't go in and edit it. Okay, so it's important that you write your names down after the test and get the correct spellings. All right, so again, if it doesn't come up right in the steno, if you see steno and you write somebody's name, it doesn't mean that you wrote it incorrectly. It just means that your dictionary is not recognizing it. And they don't recognize a lot of the proper names until you get out of school and you build your dictionary. As time goes on, you know, you can as you tell your dictionary, okay, I write Edna as ED, I come back for NA, and once you put it in your dictionary, it will remember it, okay? But right now you have a limited dictionary, so a lot of these proper names are not going to come up. Maybe some of the ones that are one stroke that you flag, but a lot of the two-stroke words are not going to come up, but it doesn't mean that you're writing it incorrectly, okay? Another thing I want you to do is when you're writing a name like Maxwell, don't use any briefs. So I would write Maxwell as M-A-X, and I would come back for W-E-L. Okay, don't use the W final L for well, because software might pull apart Max and well, and because it might think, oh, it's well the brief, W-E-L-L. Okay, so write it out phonetically. Okay. Also, when you're a court reporter out in the field, again, you're going to be building your dictionary, but let's say you were to go on a job and somebody has the name Bryn, and it's only spelled with one N, and you have it in there, but it's B-R-Y-N-N, and she spells it B-R-Y-N. What you do is you would open up a job dictionary and you would change that name for that day, for that job, to B-R-Y-N. So there's ways to get around that once you become a working reporter, okay? Also, it's important to write proper names the way they sound and not cut off any part of the name, because many names are similar. You might hear Bree, Bryn, Brinley, Brayley, Brenna, Braden, and a lot of times I'll hear a student say, oh, for that proper name, I just wrote Bray. Well, what happens if it's Bryn or her friend Bryn Lee or Braden, and you just have Bray because you only wanted to write one stroke? It's going to be impossible to know, did I write Bray Lee, Brinley, Bryn, Bree, Brenna, Braden? Lots of different words, proper names that are maybe off by one consonant or one vowel. So it's very important that you get a readable outline. So you're writing the whole name phonetically. Okay. All right. So if you have any questions about stitching, let me know. Again, when you're doing your homework, as long, you're looking at this actual sheet and you're writing what you see. You don't have to worry about changing anything unless it were a test. You'd go in the edit mode and you would want your test to look like this. Take a look at the way I have written out these sentences, okay? Cora Fernandez, comma, F-E-R-N-A-N-D-E-Z, comma, is her name. If you can take out the stitching and the sentence makes sense, you know it's going to be wrapped with commas, meaning before and after. I can say Cora Fernandez is her name. So that means I can take out the stitching and it makes sense. So I'm going to need a comma before and after the stitching, okay? Same with her name is Tara, T-A-R-A. I can take out the stitching in it. I've got a complete sentence. So that's why I need a comma there. But it wouldn't make sense for me to say Douglas spells his name. I'm leaving you hanging. Okay, that's why we don't need a comma there, because it's Douglas spells his name what? Douglas. Okay, so that's one of the rules that you can follow, whether or not to use a comma. If it makes sense without the stitching, you need the comma. If it doesn't make sense, you do not need the comma. Okay, all right, then over the last 18.9 section where those sentences are continued, he works at the Bennett, comma, B-E-N-N-E-T-T, comma, company. So you can say he works at the Bennett Company, so that's why you need commas there. Now, that company is capitalized because it's a proper noun. It's the Bennett Company. So we want to flag company in that case. Okay, initial K, final P with the flag because it's a particular company. Okay, it's not just any company. Okay. T-Y-S-Z-K-A is the way he spells his name, period. Okay. Her name is Bertha Valdez, comma, V-A-L-D-E-Z, period. He spells his name, P-O-Y-N-T-E-R. Jacob, comma, J-A-C-O-B, comma, is his name, period. All right, so again, if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. I will go over, and remind you guys about the punctuation when we have our test on stitching, our next test, okay? All right, so that concludes our class covering lesson 18. When you have finished this at least 3 times, preferably more, especially now that we're getting into some more crucial concepts, you need to spend a little bit more time. So I encourage you to do that before you start the read back. So we'll see you soon in the read back portion of the class. Bye-bye.